The smell of the sea never left me. Even in moments of calm, when the shadow of the seas glided smoothly over the dark waters, the salt clung to my skin, my clothes, even my dreams. But that night, the air was different, heavier, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath, waiting. I leaned against the deck railing, watching the shadows of the men moving silently. They were mere silhouettes in the dim glow of the lanterns, but their murmurs carried a tension that hadn't been there before. Something was brewing among the crew. "You feel it too, don't you?" Jonas's rough voice made me turn. The old carpenter was leaning against a barrel. His eyes narrowed as he watched two sailors whispering near the main mast. His face, marked by scars and years of wind, was more serious than usual. "What do you feel?" I asked, trying to sound unconcerned. He spat on the deck before answering. "Mutiny." The word hung in the air like a knife about to fall. My fingers tightened involuntarily against the ship's wood. "You're delirious, old man," I murmured, but my heart was already pounding faster. Jonas chuckled low, a dry, humorless sound. "I've been on ships longer than you've been alive. I know when men are ready to slit throats." I looked around again. Now I noticed the exchanged glances, the restrained gestures, the hands clenching into fists when officers passed. Even the cook, normally a peaceful man, had a strange gleam in his eyes. "Why?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Jonas leaned closer, his breath warm and heavy with rum. "Probably the same as always. Hunger, fear, a captain who's led them to the edge of the abyss. Captain Villar." The name echoed like a curse in my mind. He ruled the shadow of the seas with an iron fist, but lately his decisions seemed darker. Rations cut, routes changed without explanation, and the whispers about the treasure we never saw. "What about you?" I asked Jonas. "Which side will you take?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a piece of wood from his pocket and began carving with a short knife. "I've survived a mutiny before," he finally said. "It never ends well." Before I could ask more, a shout echoed from the quarterdeck. "Blood on the deck!" Jonas and I exchanged a glance before rushing toward the commotion. A group of sailors had gathered around a fallen body. It was the boatswain, Henrique, his dark uniform stained red. One of the men, the hulking Artur, held a still dripping dagger. "He was spying on us," Artur snarled. "The captain sent him to snoop." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. Everyone knew what it meant. The line had been crossed. There was no turning back. Then the first pistol shot rang out. The blast cut through the night like thunder, and a sailor's body crumpled heavily onto the deck. Shouts erupted in every direction. "Down with the captain! Kill the officers!" Chaos took hold. Men grabbed knives, pieces of wood, anything that could serve as a weapon. I backed away, trying to escape the violence, but the ship was already consumed by revolt. Jonas grabbed my arm. "Let's get below deck," he shouted over the noise, "before it's too late." But it already was. The shadow of the seas groaned like a wounded beast as the first cannon fired, not at an enemy, but on the ship itself. Someone had sabotaged the deck. And then, as if the sea gods had decided our fate, a violent impact shook the hull. Wood splintered, men fell, and I knew even before I heard the cry that we were doomed. "Reef ahead!" The shadow of the seas was going down.
The impact was like the strike of a wrathful god. The shadow of the seas shuddered from bow to stern, and for a moment, everything fell silent, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath. Then, hell broke loose. Wood splintered with sharp cracks, like bones snapping. The deck tilted violently, throwing men from side to side like rag dolls. I fell to my knees, my hands slipping on the floor, already slick with salt water and blood. "We're breaking apart!" someone screamed, their voice hoarse with terror. No one needed to say it. The sound of the hull being torn open by the reefs was impossible to ignore, a growling, ravenous beast devouring the ship's flesh. The smell of the sea, once so familiar, was now suffocating, invasive, as if the ocean were already inside us. Jonas grabbed me by the collar, hauling me up. "Move, boy. If we stay here, we'll go down with the ship." We stumbled toward the lifeboats, but chaos had already taken over. Sailors fought for space, punching, kicking, no loyalty, no reason, just the animal instinct to survive. One of them, the young cabin boy Elias, was backed against the mast, his face white with horror. "They've blocked the boats!" he shouted at me, eyes wide. "Only the officers can—" Another crash cut him off. This time it came from above. The main mast, wounded in the collision, split in two with a long, agonized groan. "Look out!" There was no time. The massive wooden beam came crashing down like lightning, crushing 3 men in an instant. The impact shook the deck, and a wave, stronger than the others, washed over the starboard side, dragging bodies and wreckage with it. Then I saw him. Captain Villar. He stood on the quarterdeck stairs, motionless, as if the chaos around him didn't exist. His dark blue coat, usually immaculate, was stained with gunpowder and blood, but his face remained calm, almost satisfied. "You wanted the ship? Then keep it." Jonas cursed under his breath. He knew. "Knew what?" I shouted as another wave hit us harder. "About the reefs. He brought us here on purpose." Before I could process the betrayal, a cry came from the bow. "Water in the hold! We're sinking!" The shadow of the seas groaned, listing slowly to one side. Water was already rushing through the hatches, swallowing everything in its path. There was no more time. "Take this!" Jonas shoved a piece of floating wood into my hands before turning to Elias. "You too, boy. Swim away from the ship, or the whirlpool will drag you under." I looked back one last time. Captain Villar was still there, now laughing, a harsh, joyless sound. "Good luck, rats," were his last words before the deck beneath him gave way, swallowing him into the dark. And then the sea took me. The water was icy, the darkness absolute. I clung to the wooden plank with all my strength as the waves tossed me like a toy. Somewhere between the screams and the ocean roar, I heard Elias calling for me. But when I turned, he was already vanishing into the shadows. And the shadow of the seas, the ship that had been our home and our prison, sank with one last sigh.
The night wouldn't end. I floated in the darkness, clinging to the piece of wood Jonas had given me as the sea tossed me like a broken toy. Salt water burned my cracked lips, and my fingers had long gone numb against the splintered plank. Only a throbbing pain remained from gripping it so hard. Somewhere in the dark, screams still echoed. Men calling for their mothers, for God, for help. One by one, they fell silent, until only the sound of the waves remained. And something else, a slow, dragging noise coming from the wreckage. "Is someone there?" My voice came out as a croak. No answer, just the sound again, closer now. Then I saw it. A silhouette dragging itself across a broken piece of deck. The man, if he could still be called that, moved like a crab, one arm twisted at an impossible angle. When the moon broke through the clouds for just a second, I recognized the face. Arthur. The mutineer who had stabbed the boatswain. Now half his face was crushed, and his one good eye burned with a feverish light. He spat water and blood. You got to see." "What?" I tried to pull away, but the current kept us close. He laughed, a wet, sick sound. Hold! When the ship split, I saw. We weren't just carrying rum and grain." His fingers dug into a pouch tied to his belt, and he threw something at me. The object glinted dully before landing in the water between us. A coin, but not like any I'd ever seen. This one was heavier, older, with markings that made my eyes ache just to look at them. The captain, he was taking these to someone. Something down there paid for us to wreck here. Before I could ask, Arthur lunged, not at me, but at something behind me. His scream lasted less than a second before it was cut short by a snap. When I turned, trembling, the water behind me was dark and empty. But where Arthur had been, a slick of oil spread across the surface, and in it, reflected in the moonlight, a shape that was not human watched.
Dawn came without relief. The rising sun should have brought hope, but it only revealed the full extent of our despair. Of the 80 men aboard the Shadow of the Seas, only 5 still breathed, clinging to wreckage like corpses refusing to sink. And I knew we would be dead before the next sunrise. Arthur's coin weighed heavy in my pocket, burning my thigh like ice. I had grabbed it before it sank, and ever since I felt things moving beneath the water, shapes that vanished when I looked straight at them. "Land!" Elias's cracked shout made us all lift our heads. There on the horizon, a dark line cut across the sea. An island. We rowed with what little strength we had left. When my feet touched sand, I collapsed, kissing the ground like a zealot. We were alive, but the relief was short-lived. "Where are we?" Elias whispered. The island was small, ringed by reefs sharp as teeth. No vegetation grew there, only black rocks and a structure at its center, low and circular, made of the same dark stone. A temple. My hand went to the coin in my pocket. The symbols on it matched those carved above the entrance. "We shouldn't be here," Jonas said, his face pale. "This place isn't on any charts." Then we heard it, singing, from the sea. I turned slowly. In the shallows, shapes moved. Not fish, not sharks. Things with limbs too long, heads too narrow, eyes that reflected light like a cat's. They were coming ashore, and they brought offerings. Bodies of the Shadow of the Sea's crew, stacked like firewood. It was a deal, I realized suddenly, the coin searing my palm. The captain brought us here as payment. Jonas drew his knife. Elias wept. And the things from the sea began to climb onto the beach. Epilogue.
3 months later, a merchant ship spotted smoke on the nameless island. When they landed, they found only one man, skeletal, sitting before a fire of bones. In his hand, an ancient coin spun endlessly. And when they asked what had happened, he only smiled. We agreed.